everyone, my name is Sam, and thanks for checking out this video. Make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, hit the bell notification, and give the video a thumbs up. So as always, I wanted to tell you my general thoughts and reviews on the books that I read in the past week. I actually had a pretty good reading week. I managed to read 4 books in total again and start a 5th book, but it is a B-size book, so I didn't finish it this week. So I'm very happy about that. So the first book that I read this week was actually a reread of A Touch of Gold by Annie Sullivan. And it's actually a pretty recent reread. I think I read it like less than 2 months ago. But Annie is actually going to be in the TBR and Beyond group doing a virtual visit. And it's a group read. So I wanted to refresh my memory. But I also really do legitimately love this book. It is a King Midas retelling from the perspective of his daughter. And there are pirates, lots of betrayal, a sort of love triangle, but not love triangle, and pirates and betrayal and more pirates and more betrayal. And freaking love this book. I particularly actually really like that, even though it's not a massively thick book. I think it's like 280 pages or something like that. Oh, sorry, 310. It's not a massive book. However, I feel like the main character, Cora, does an awful lot of actual growth. Like, she realizes things very quickly, and she's very sheltered for reasons explained in the book at the beginning, and that really changes quite, not all of a sudden, not like, oh, that didn't make any sense, she didn't build up, but it's just really woven in throughout. And actually after having watched Annie in the TBR and Beyond group, I don't know if I said that in the future or past tense before, she did a chat a couple last week, I think, and she was explaining why she decided to include the pirates and the whole process of, well, the kingdom is in financial dire constraints, and if it's historically accurate in most places in those situations, where especially seafaring nations were falling victims to victims to piracy. And I went, oh yeah, I guess that's really true. So she did think, oh cool, yeah. So I really love this. I like the main character an awful lot, even though she's not super outspoken and strong in the beginning. I tend to find those characters very annoying. I want to slap them sometimes, but that was not the case with this. And I'm actually really, really curious to see where the second book is coming out in 2020, I think, goes. And the author also has another retelling coming out in 2019, which I'm very, very excited about. I'm very curious about it. And yeah, plus the cover is insanely pretty. Yeah. So I ended up giving this book, I think, a 5 out of 5 stars. There's honestly, legitimately my only thing was oh, it's not long enough. I like my books to be 400 plus pages. And that's just a personal preference thing. But I legitimately really enjoy this book. And even if you're someone who's oh my god, I'm really tired of retellings, I, honest to God, have never heard of a King Midas retelling before, especially in the YA realm. So, and the one that she's releasing in 2019 is a story that I've actually never even heard of that it's a retelling of. And it's a short story it's a retelling of a short story, lengthened out. So I'm really, really excited to see. I'm cool with retellings as long as it's just not the Beauty and the Beast. I feel like I've reached capacity with that. So this was a really cool twist, and including pirates is always a plus for me. So highly recommend. Then I read Rosemarked by Livia Blackburn. This is the first book, and I believe it's just supposed to be a duology. The sequel, Umber Touch, just came out, I think, last Tuesday or the Tuesday before, or is about to come out, and I'm so in love with these covers, and I actually think I may try and pick up Umber Touched. So I will say, this book is much slower paced. It doesn't have a lot of, action stuff the way you would assume, based on the summary. So it follows our main character, who is a healer in this community, and she contracts rose marks, essentially rose pox, and basically in that situation, you either die eventually quickly and it's contagious, or you kind of sweat the fever out and are one of the few lucky people that survive it, and then you're left with marks, and then you're called Umber Touched, and you're immune from the Rose Plague in the future, which I'm assuming is where the sequel is going to go based on that title. But our main character gets hit with the Rose Plague even though she's a healer. So it's kind of an ironic situation of she can heal all these other people and was taking care of all these sick people, but she herself is falling victim to this plague. And it's in this kind of world where there's these kind of splintered kingdoms, but they all kind of have a general mutual enemy, and they're not totally sure what this enemy is doing. And there's been random rose plague outbreaks in weird pockets, and people are being blamed that it doesn't quite, dots aren't totally connecting. And then we have our other main character, who's a soldier, and he's been victim to these potential enemy kingdom, and they kind of work together, go in cahoots to start spying on that kingdom. And she uses her healing powers to essentially like flip his memory off and on like a light switch. So when he goes undercover, she takes his memory away, and then when he comes to see her, because she's a healer, so there's like a legitimate reason, she like gets information out of him. So it's really, really curious that she's like kind of fighting against the clock, and like it was just very interesting. It read more like a slower paced historical fiction, which I think is why I still ended up enjoying it. It definitely did, though, I think, struggle with pacing. So I could definitely understand. I know a few people who were like, I want to know your opinion on it because it's a fantasy and I love fantasy, but like I'm kind of struggling. So I will say that even at the end, things didn't totally pick up when like the action started happening. I think it's a combination of the writing as well as just the plot and like the tone that the author has with this world. It's not a high action. It's not a J. Kristoff kind of like lifelike where things are just like nonstop and you're almost pantsing along with them. That's not the situation. And there's also like large time jumps as well. Well, large being, subjective term, I guess. Like there's a lot of like, oh, it happened on this day, and then 2 weeks later we talked, and then 2 weeks later sort of situation. So I can definitely see why people struggled with it pace wise, but I think if you know going into it, it is a slower pace, and I think it's more of like a plot and information driven book rather than like action adventure-y. Then I think that might be helpful. So I think in the end I ended up giving this like a 3.75 or 4 out of 5 stars, and I actually am quite curious about reading the sequel, and I think this is actually like a really good time of year for myself to read it. I actually quite enjoyed it. So just be aware, it's definitely not a fast-paced fantasy, despite the plot kind of sounding like I don't want to say like, it's not copy, but like a rehash of very commonly used tropes in YA that kind of had the same thing. I feel like this does set itself apart a little bit, though, by having kind of different pacing, and I actually kind of enjoyed the romance. It's kind of sweet, and it's kind of an interesting concept. And I think that was my thing, was she did take these commonly used tropes. However, I feel like it was still a little bit different, not just the pacing, but the things that she did do with them. So I think I will continue on with this series. Then I very happy and very eagerly did a reread of Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow. This is the UK cover, I believe. Let me double check. Yes. And there's the underdust jacket. It's so pretty. This is like the fourth or fifth time I've read this book in the last like year and a half. I'm kind of obsessed with it. It's like the newish Harry Potter, which like Harry Potter's still gonna be like my forever, but it's got these like wonderful Harry Potter influences, but it's not a copy, but you can definitely see the connections of it, and like she kind of makes the thing her own, and there's like competitions in here. So our main character, Morrigan Crow, is kind of picked despite the fact that she thinks she's supposed to die right at the beginning of this book because of a prophecy. She's picked and has to compete in this 3 rounds of competition in order to join this like elite group of people with powers, and they call it like a knack. It's your kind of gift. And she's in this country illegally, though, in order to participate in them. And she's only protected from like immigration-y kind of services as long as she keeps competing and stays and makes it through to the next round. So she has people helping her, people hindering her. She's also trying to figure out what her knack is. She's also very confused as to why all these people, because a variety of people wanted to offer her this option, and she's like, what are you talking about? I'm supposed to die in like 2 days. My parents have already like accepted that I'm dying. And it's just this magical world, and my copy of Wondersmith, the sequel, showed up. I'm so excited to read it so soon. And yeah, like legitimately, this is going to be a book I'm going to forever keep rereading. I think I'm actually planning on getting that thing. I am planning on getting a tattoo related to this book in the next couple months, I think. So it's just so good. If you even like remotely ever liked any aspect of Harry Potter, I would really highly suggest you give this one a go. And there's like this Hagridy character in this hotel that's kind of like Hogwarts, and like, oh, it's just so good. And some of the knacks are actually really cool that they think of. It's just kind of like a unique but similar book, kind of. It's very difficult to explain, but highly recommend this book. And last but definitely not least, I did a reread of Wandfasted by Laurie Forrest this week as well. This is the prequel story to The Black Witch. We get to meet Ellerin, who is the main character in The Black Witch, her parents, and we know in The Black Witch that her parents die during the war, and so they're not in the picture anymore. Her uncle is taking care of her. But it's this kind of interesting world to get to see how Ellerin actually, despite the fact that her parents aren't in her lives anymore, and despite the fact that she clearly doesn't know a lot of the information about them, that she still mirrors aspects of them and their stories mirror each other. And we get to be introduced to like the characters in the Black Witch when they're like 20 or 30 years younger, and you get to see what makes them the way that they are now, and maybe why some people have alliances or feel that they owe other characters in the Black Witch honesty and allegiance. And it's just so good, and I love getting to see like the flip of the world, which I feel like is one of the most interesting parts of the Black Witch, is the whole like just blatant racism between each of the communities. And you're like, how did it get to the way that it is now, where all the Gardnerians are so ridiculously like bigoted, and then you go to this prequel world a couple decades before and you're like, oh, it's because they were on the receiving end and they wanted that power to get back at them. This whole kind of concept of revenge versus equality, and just becoming of a world of peace rather than just fighting over power. And it's interesting that there's all the things happening in the Black Witch, the scary, horrible, kind of handmaidey tale things, were all things that Ellerin's father foresaw and was trying to get Ellerin's mother to help him to stop, because he saw it coming like a million miles away. It was just so good. I freaking love her writing. I can't understand how she's a debut author as well with this series. It's just so good, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So now I'm freshed up on Wandfasted, and I'm going to read The Black Witch like really soon, probably this upcoming week. So those are all the books that I read this week. Let me know in the comment section down below if you read any of these and what you thought, or even if you didn't read any of these, what did you read this week, and did you like it or did you not like it? I'd love to know. Make sure to check the description box down below. I will link all of the books to their Goodreads pages, and I will also link all of my social media. If you follow me, I will follow you back.